You want to hear a really scary Halloween story? When I was a kid, there was a house nearby that handed out saran-wrapped rolls of 5 pennies each. Woo! Seriously though, guys, no apples, no rolls of pennies, and if you think the kid looks too old, remember they're old enough to know where to get toilet paper. Happy Monday, everybody. I'm Bryno, and this is the Morning Report on the federal courts for October 27th, 2025. Do me a favor, double tap your screen, comment the worst Halloween thing, candy or otherwise, that you've ever been given, and watch the first minute right now, even if you're coming back, so we hit the FYP. Today is going to be very First Amendment heavy, particularly the press portion, so grab a coffee and buckle up for some excitement. All right, we're going to start with AP, Associated Press v. Cheung. Now, most of you know that when Donald Trump came into office, he renamed the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America. But the AP kept calling it the Gulf of Mexico anyway, so the White House kicked them out of the White House press room. And that's what this case is about. Now, there is a legitimate question in this case, but we're going to get there in a second. First, I want to explain to you guys why, in the late 1700s, Americans needed different press and expression protections than English people. See, England was run by a king, so peasants like you, me, and your mom really had very little input on how the government was run. So, if all you as a lawmaker care about is how well the government's running, you're going to want the king to know what's going on, maybe even parliament, but it doesn't really matter what the peasants actually know. Matter of fact, it's probably better if they don't know much at all. Certainly nothing bad about the government, because their job is just to be happy with their lives and keep tending the sheep. By contrast, in America, you, me, and your mom aren't peasants anymore. We are we the people. We get to pick the government. And so each of us needs to have access to all that information that the king might have had so that we can make those decisions properly, right? And that's why it's so important that information, journalism, the press be totally free to slide in and out of situations, take notes, and relay that information they collect, unfiltered, back to you, me, and your mom. They can't make us listen. You can lead a horticulture, but you can't make her think. That's Dorothy Parker. But they cannot be forced to filter their information in order to make the government look good. Because the sovereigns, the people, us, we need that information to keep our government functioning. But I said there was a legitimate question here, and there is. The government's argument, even with all of that in mind, is that they may not be able to stop the Associated Press from printing the words Gulf of Mexico, but they still don't have to let them into the newsroom. It's a small room. Not everybody in the world gets to be in there, and they're allowed to decide who gets to come in and who doesn't. Or at least, that is what they said in the reply brief that they filed on Friday. Now, the AP disagrees, and this will be argued before the DC Circuit Court of Appeals on November 24th. And these two pieces of information, the protection of the press and the discretion of the administration, aren't necessarily conflicting. Can the president give an exclusive interview to just one news agency? Sure, why not? Is that any different from this? Maybe not. And on the flip side, can the government say, hey, we're kicking you out, Mr. Reporter, specifically because you reported the news in a way we didn't like? Maybe, maybe not. So, that is a nice, narrow question. We'll see how it gets argued on the 24th. But with changes to the Pentagon right now, with their press pool rules, this case might have some legs to it. So let's see if that discussion works its way in here. Okay, now we're going to hit Chicago Headline Club and discuss whether federal officers restricted the First Amendment rights of Americans in Chicago last week, particularly after seeing that video of the CBP commander throwing tear gas into a crowd. Now, I'm hearing some pushback in the comments about whether the officers were justified in their actions. So I'm going to build on what I said in the last case about the First Amendment for a moment, particularly focused on the role and protection of journalists. So, as I said, it is key to our functioning democracy that you, me, and your mom, all of us, have access to information about what the government is doing so that we can make informed decisions about whether or not we want to replace our lawmakers. So, going to talk about a case for a second. New York Times and Washington Post v. United States. It's a 1971 case, which the movie The Post is based on. And it's about whether newspapers could release the Pentagon Papers. It's an internal document evaluating years of U.S. policy in Vietnam. Basically unveiled that the government had lied to everybody about our ability to win that war over 4 presidencies: Truman, Eisenhower, Kennedy, and Johnson. And the DOD all but begged the court not to let these papers be released. The president warned that if they were released, soldiers would die. Our alliances would be ruined and the war would be prolonged. And the Supreme Court said that despite those warnings, even assuming they were true, they would not stop the newspapers from printing them. And I want to quote Justice Stewart's concurring opinion here. Justice Stewart said that the executive branch has a lot of power in the international relations and national defense areas that he said had been pressed nearly to the hilt. And, quote, in the absence of the governmental checks and balances present in the other areas of our national life, the only effective restraint upon executive policy and power may lie in an enlightened citizenry, in an informed and critical public opinion which alone can here protect the values of democratic government, end quote. In other words, particularly in the areas where the executive branch may be given more deference and where other branches are not checking the presidential power, the power of the press must be absolute, no matter the consequences, because there's no other way for us, you and me, to effectively exercise our decision-making power, which is sovereign. So, tomorrow morning, Gregory Bovino, the Border Patrol commander, is called before the federal court in Chicago in front of Judge Ellis, and he's accused, in violation of her direct order, of throwing tear gas without any warning at what I have seen in a video is a man with a giant video camera on his shoulder. Certainly looks like a news camera. And last week, Mr. Bovino said in an interview, "I take my orders from the executive branch." But Mr. Bovino has sworn an allegiance to the U.S. Constitution as well. And that is not just one branch of the government. That is you, me, and your mom. We the people, the ones who run the show here. That's who gives the order. And we're supposed to have unfettered access to the view from the ground. He's not allowed to tear gas journalists and risk scaring off our access to that information. And that's why, or at least one of the reasons why, he does not get to just tear gas a crowd even if he feels threatened. Justice Stewart made it very clear. It does not matter how big the threat. Our access to the information is not allowed to be restricted under any circumstances. So, we will see what happens in his questioning tomorrow. It seems like Chicago got a little quieter after Friday. The government did file a motion for a protective order this morning. The text is in my shared documents. You can check it out before I'm asked to remove it. Might be something interesting in there, I'm not sure. Okay, as usual, there's a ton going on with the National Guard cases, but really everything today is sort of hanging on a decision by the Ninth Circuit that's expected tomorrow. A 3-judge panel handed down a decision last week in Oregon v. Trump. The state of Oregon requested an en banc rehearing and in most circuits that means that the 3-judge panel will be reconsidered by a panel of all the circuit court judges. In the Ninth Circuit, because it's so big, I think they do an en banc hearing with just like 11 judges or something like that. But all of the judges in the circuit have to vote whether or not they want to rehear it. And they said they will let us know tomorrow sometime. So we're all kind of waiting on that. I also listened to the oral arguments for DC v. Trump, and I made a video about that Friday night. You can also watch a live stream of me sort of parroting what the court is saying in the live videos on my YouTube. All of these documents are in my military folder in my shared docs, split up by state. All right, last up, a couple in Virginia have filed a case in DC District Court requesting a temporary restraining order to stop the destruction of the East Wing of the White House. I hate to say it, but I think they might be a little late. Charles and Judith Voorhees are residents of Northern Virginia and have filed a case requesting injunctive relief against the president, who they say has violated the National Capital Planning Act in destructing what they call the People's House. Now, frankly, this isn't very likely to succeed. It's a very short filing without enough information for a TRO, especially against the president. They haven't demonstrated why they have standing. The complaint doesn't list the parties, and I saw this morning that the court already filed a notice of errata saying that they're missing some elements, but you know what? Nobody else got off their asses to try to save the East Wing, so Mr. and Mrs. Voorhees, good on you. Honestly, thanks for caring enough to at least try. You get a golden duck for today. And that's more than I can say for your mom. Sorry, but I needed to bring it home somewhere. All right, that is your morning report on the past weekend in the federal courts. I got to thank Theresa, Klatzker, and Larry for your continued support. Larry kept me in snacks all weekend while I researched, which is a key part of research. If you'd like to support me, subscribe. Check the link in my bio. I've got an Amazon wish list in there. Check out my Substack, or otherwise, just keep watching, everybody, and I will keep going. Thanks a lot. Have a great Monday.